A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen, former editor-in-chief of CNBC Africa, CEO of Nielsen Media and Associates. I'll be chairing today's session on investment and innovation in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. Before we deep dive into this conversation and I introduce my panelists, I'd like you to refer to the slide behind me, which will come up in just a minute. We're going to do the second survey of the day, and we're going to put up the key reasons to be hopeful when it comes to the MENA region. So that slide should come up in a moment. The key reasons to be hopeful when it comes to Middle East and North Africa. When that does come up, you can go into the app. There we have them. Go into Rome Med 2019 app and rank them, please, in order of the reasons to be most hopeful for the MENA region to the least hopeful elements. So what do you think will happen that will catalyze positivity in the MENA region? That would be the order of magnitude in which you need to rank them. When we come to the end of the session, we will look at the results of that survey and share them with you. As I said, we're going to deep dive now into driving investments and innovation in the MENA region. And joining me to my immediate left, we have His Excellency Mansoor Al-Mahmoud. He's CEO of the Qatar Investment Authority. We're joined by Pierre Heilbronn. He's Vice President, Policy and Partnerships at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. We are also joined by Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD. We have to his left, we are joined by President Prodi, former President, EU Commission, former UN Special Envoy for Africa. And we are joined by His Excellency Rachid, Mohamed Rachid, who is currently chairman of the board of Valentino company in Italy. The format that we're going to take is a short introduction from each of the gentlemen, setting out their perspectives in terms of their views of the current MENA region. And I want to share some stats with you, looking at the World Bank's latest report that was updated at the end of October 2019. Growth for the MENA region has been downgraded from the initial 1.5% projection for the entire MENA region for 2019 to now 0.6%. That's as a result of voluntary oil production cuts. It is a result of geopolitical tensions and also a beleaguered global growth environment. You have some outstanding growth stories within the MENA region. Djibouti projected to grow at 7% and Egypt at 5.5%. If you look at the GCC, aggregate growth for the GCC coming in at about 2%. Now the projections, although we're low on the 2019 projection at that aggregate 0.6%, the projection ramps up quite nicely for 2020 for the MENA region at 2.6%, and for 2021 at 2.9%. Again, those are the stats for the region. I just wanted to set a little context. Obviously, key to this discussion is regional trade across the region, which sits now at only 10%. And we're looking at extracting synergies and catalyzing that trade, and also in establishing key channels to the rest of the world from the MENA region. So how do we become a global catalyst from a MENA perspective? Your Excellency Al-Mahmoud, I'm going to ask you to weigh in, sir, from a Qatar perspective. We will deal with politics in the second discussion. We've got the Deputy Prime Minister of Qatar joining us on stage. Right now, we're focusing on financial cohesion, on trade, on integration, where we are and what we need to do. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Bronwyn. I'm honored to be part of this panel. As you know, the MENA region spread between 20 countries. You are talking about a region that connects 3 continents. The widely spoken languages, English and French, with a population of 350 million to 400 million. 50% of this population is youth and under 24 years old. So you are talking about a huge potential that we need to unlock. In order to unlock this, we need to really maximize the location of the region, invest in the human capital. How to invest in the human capital? I think the region needs to have a review in terms of the social reform and economic reform. Education is the main pillar for the population to unlock their potential. This is a main pillar for any growth. In Qatar, for example, education is a very important element. I'm proud to be from a government that are taking education very seriously. The biggest items in our national budget is education. And we are ranking in the MENA region as #1 in terms of the education system. So this is very important. And we are taking education even beyond our region. We have a program that is education above all. And this is given access to education to children who have no access to education. And proudly, we have reached around 10 million children have an access to an education that they have used not to have any access. So education is very important. In addition to this, I think government has to do a lot of reform economically to unlock a lot of potential. In Qatar, for example, we have upgraded a lot of processes and policies to make sure that we can attract international investors. Lately, we have created the Investment Promotion Agency, which mandate is to review all the processes and the procedure to make sure that we can attract investors. And now attracting an international investor is getting very competitive. All the region, including countries beyond the MENA region, are really targeting the same segment of an international investors. So you have to put something unique on the table to attract that particular investors. And the international investor is looking into an easy access to funding and easy access to procedure within the government to create companies, to employ a skilled labor, and this goes back to the education that we talked about. So education is very important. Investing in the human capital, reform the economic policy, and maximize our location of the region are the main pillar of really unlocking the potential of the region.
Are you enthusiastic about potential regional integration?
I think I think eventually we will reach that stage where all the government will realize that the only option to unlock the potential of the trade between countries is important. As you said, 10% of the region trade goes only to the member of the region, and this is very small. And if you see it from positive point of view, there is a huge potential, and government has to realize this. And will happen only if the government really change their mindset and reduce their political agenda and focus on the economic reform to make sure that the region will have a proper growth.
So, Your Excellency, if I'm reading you correctly, key is the political integration, speaking with one voice for the region before we can hope for that economic integration.
Absolutely. I think the agenda of the political issue and geopolitical issue in the region has hijacked the time and effort of the government. I think they have to move a little bit toward focusing and giving time and effort to the economic more than the political aspect.
Vice President Heilbronn, let me bring you in here from a European Bank for Reconstruction and Development perspective. Weigh in with your view, the work that you're doing currently, and how you see the MENA region extrapolating the growth that we want to see for the territories.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we have each of us our point of view on the region. The one I bring to the table is the one of an institution which is quite new in the region, because our shareholders, the G7, but also all our shareholders, ask EBRD to bring its capacity, investment capacity, but also policy capacity, not a long time ago, just after the Arab Springs. And the MENA region became one of the largest regions in terms of investment. We've invested 10 billion euros over the last 5 or 6 years, 74% in the private sector, which seemed 6 years ago quite something very ambitious, given the predominance of state-owned companies and states in the economies. What we really believe is that it's a region full of opportunities, which has unfortunately missed some of them during the last decade. Also, because the root elements of a sustainable development have not probably been properly dealt with. And one of these elements, to be able to attract FDIs, but also to unleash the potential to develop local private sector, are very much linked to education, as was mentioned before, but I would say also governance, which is quite weak in all these countries. We've published, by the way, a few days ago, a report with a lot of data showing the interlinkages between the governance, not only in the public sector, but in corporate sector, and the potential capacity of the region. And that's why working on investment climate requires a change of mindset in both companies, but also in the way the interaction between the public sphere and the private companies is dealt with. That means sometimes working in very gritty details. We're working, for example, with the OECD in some regions like the Suez Canal Economic Zone to bring that together. The right regulatory framework, the capacity also to build a predictable environment which allows afterwards international investor and Egyptian investor to be there.
Because that certainty element is what weighs heavily on investment.
Yes.
And foreign direct investment is not going to come if you don't know the lie of the land.
So that's exactly the main problem. The second issue you hinted to is also the size of the market. Regional integration is obviously, for political reasons, something which is difficult to achieve in the region. We believe, and we are very much working on infrastructure projects, be there on ports, inland ports, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt, which can unlock the potential of regional integration in this region, which is the least integrated one in the world. When you take the train,
stretch.
yes, exactly. It's between 5 and 10% according to the countries, which is extremely low, and which doesn't build on the complementarities between the different economies of the region.
Deputy Secretary General, let me bring you in from an OECD perspective. And again, we've got different views we're building on the panel when it comes to the MENA region. If you can weigh in, sir, with where you stand, and we'll continue to rally the voices as we establish where we are and where we're going.
Thank you so much, but I'm going to start with a complaint. There was 7 reasons for good hope up there, but there was not the 8th important one, the OECD sound advice on attracting investment and innovation to the region. That should be there, obviously, as well. No.
We need to redo the slide.
But I am going to talk a little bit about what the OECD, in cooperation with EBRD and others, can do to improve the sound regulation, which is really a prerequisite for attracting investment, for attracting or spurring innovation, which goes to the heart of this panel. and also goes to the heart of the fourth pillar of the conference, or the whole idea of this Med dialogue, namely the shared prosperity pillar. So it may be a little bit technical, talking about sound regulation, investment, and innovation, but really, if we don't get that right in the region, it will be very, very difficult to get to that vision of shared prosperity. We are really at what one could call a pivotal moment. We just released our economic outlook earlier this month or last month, and for the first time since the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, we are now projecting that world growth will be below 3% at 2.9%, with no immediate view to world growth rising above 3%. That's due to a lot of factors outside the MENA region, weakened certainty about trade and investment and so on. But of course, political developments in the MENA region does not help. And I wish I could say that MENA region would be an exception to this to this outlook, but it's not. In fact, on the contrary, we see growth in the MENA region going from 1.2% in last year, perhaps down to only 0.6% this year.
In line with the stats from the World Bank.
No, in line with the stats from the World Bank, and you could even say that you mentioned some of the positives from the region. So when the average is 0.6% in 2019, it means some of the countries in the region are actually bordering recession.
Absolutely.
So it just shows you that the starting point for this whole process is not an easy one. On top of this comes then what we've discussed in earlier panels as well, that women and youth are especially vulnerable groups. So if we don't get them along, it'll be even harder for the MENA region to catch up. I'm going to do a little bit of advertisement for the youth panel tomorrow morning, where we're going to present a new regional report on the situation of the young people in MENA, because I think it's so important. I won't tell you everything that's in there, but we're going to have a look at what happened to the expectations of the youth from the Arab Spring in terms of their trust in government, in terms of unemployment rates among the youth and so on. But that's
I'll help you with your plug there, because His Excellency Al-Mahmoud put on the table the stat that 46%, 50% of the population in MENA region is below the age of 24.
Right.
So spot on.
Exactly. A little bit about the sound regulation and sound governance, because this really is the key to the process. If we don't get the administration of public resources and management of public affairs right, we will not have the right incentive to get investments. We will not have the right incentive to get innovation that goes both for domestic and foreign investment. So it is a prerequisite for getting to inclusive growth. We need, in the region, more effective and efficient business regulation. We need more e-government. We need more regulatory impact analysis. We have done an index that we call the Regulatory Quality Index. And the MENA region stands at 42 points, whereas, for example, East Asia stands at 50, Latin America and Caribbean at 55, Europe at 70, and so on. So there is a lot of scope for improvement here. It's an important area. You touched upon, Your Excellency, also the regional economic integration. That's important in itself, but it's also important when it comes to these regulatory regimes. The more they are harmonized and at a better level, the easier it will be for outside investors and companies in the region to invest. Let me also mention integrity as another prerequisite. Corruption really limits investments, it distorts competition, it adds to the uncertainty of business operations. So that's another thing that we should look at. Trade and investment facilitation is also important. It is, of course, difficult when you're in an overall environment where world economic growth is shrinking, and the region itself stands at perhaps close to recession, but it makes the need for trade and investment facilitation perhaps even bigger. Lastly, just one word about, or two maybe, about the essential role of innovation. The region really also needs to grasp and embrace megatrends such as the digital transformation and the greening of our economies. There's a lot of potential here if you can catch the train here on digital transformation and the greening of the economy in terms of innovation. Digital technologies, cloud computing, the Internet of Things. If the MENA region dive into that as well. It can not only improve the state of their economies, but also the participation of the public.
We're definitely going to spend some time talking about the digital economy. I know that the Qatar Investment Authority is definitely spearheading investment in that space. So we'll come back to that. You wanted to make a final point.
A final point, maybe, I think education. You mentioned that, Your Excellency. Education is, of course, extremely important if we are to realize the full potential of this fantastic talent pool that you have, with about 30% of the active population between 15 and 29. So that is paramount. So sound and innovative governance with that, MENA countries, with the help of the OECD as well, EBRD and others, could actually be taking decisive steps toward greater investments in innovation.
President Prodi, if you can weigh in now with your view of where we are from a MENA perspective, and whether you see hope for the future.
Look, I don't want to repeat all the data and the figures we received now, but there is a contradiction in the economic structure. You describe this as talented young people, number of countries, so on and so on. But when you analyze the economic structure, you understand that 56% of exports are oil and gas, energy. So this is the contradiction between trying to find employment for young people and the economy. You know, economy is going in one side, oil, and people, cannot find employment in this capital industry, and when you see investments, they are in the most part directed where production is. And, I don't want to get back to the figure of European investments that have been decreasing so much with the crisis and did not improve as expected after the crisis. But as a consequence of this structure, you have an incredible change of the, let's say, export pattern of the area. The internal trade is as low as with, but is going to Asia. Exports are going to Asia. Of course, you can say it's natural, but now export to Asia is 55% of all area, and in the beginning of the century, they were 40. So you have an incredible increase. Why? You follow mainly not only non-energy, but mainly energy export. So clearly, there are all the good reasons we listen now, that you need regulation, you need, but the real message is that because there was not a clear chain to create an internal market, the flow of the economy is following energy and is going east. So we have to adopt all the process that you listen. But, to do that, you need, I don't say a political authority, but at least a political coordination. And so we have to make an effort, maybe to create some sort of sub-regional cooperating groups, if we are able to consider MENA as an homogeneous area. But we have to start this process of integration, because, look, with the situation we have now, how can you have investment that need economics of scale? A culture of foreign trade that is low, an internal market that is low, difficulty in transport and so on and so on. So we have to move that at least creating some sort of suboptimal trade area in the MENA region. This is what I think, because I don't dream to have an immediate trade area or something similar, but just to give the message that the integration is that. This is what I think, because the economy, the trend of the economy is against manpower engaging.
Let's pick up there, President Prodi, with His Excellency Rachid, in terms of maybe a step before this broader integration, as President Prodi is putting on the table, that you've got smaller integration, sub-integration, that potentially could happen. And here, sir, I want you to weigh in, obviously, with your experience from the public sector space in Egypt, and obviously now as chairman of Valentino, the private sector play as well. You've got both sides of the coin very well covered.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, President Prodi have been extremely involved and added his wisdom to what we can do between North and South. What I would like to share with you is really the experience from inside of the kitchen, because we are talking about investment, we are talking about innovation, and we are talking about the challenge of how to expand that in the MENA region. Well, if you look at the reality on the ground, and of course, I know this is a moving target, but the challenge that we had when we were in the government, and I had the chance to be there for 5.5 years, and we looked relatively successful. We were growing at 6-7%. We increased FDI to almost 15 billion. But the reality that there was a lot of struggles, because, and that is not uncommon across the region. Most of the markets in the region are very distorted. Why? Because governments interfere in everything. So the markets are distorted. And when you are talking about an investment environment, you want to have some sort of a market balance, and it doesn't exist. So you need to bring that balance first. Second, monopolies everywhere, and dominated by governments mainly. So you have monopolies in the economy, which create a very serious barrier for entry for companies to come in. Mostly, as I said, led by the government, sometimes, patronage of the government, of different sectors in the economy, but that's a reality. Then you have the lack of financing in general, because not only because there is no funds, but also because the financial institutions are not necessarily equipped and directed to go for real investment. In some countries, banks make a lot of money because they lend the government or they lend governmental institutions. But when it comes to real investment and projects, they are not really comfortable there. Then you have the set of complexity of laws and regulations everywhere. You have that, and that is really a very significant barrier of entry. Then you have something very alternative to that, the attractiveness of the informal market. It's great. I mean, informal markets in our part of the world is great. It's cheap. You can get in almost free, and you are not really under the supervision of any regulatory body, and you don't have to pay taxes. And you have just to find your way there.
And the informal market is a huge employer.
Exactly, and as a formal market, you have to compete with that. Then when you come to innovation, patents and copyrights rights are not protected in any way or form. So that is the environment on a government and on a country level. Of course, it is changing, it is improving, but they are still there. Every single element of that is still there. If we move to the regional level, so I think this is what President Prodi was referring to. Our region is not homogeneous. Well, I would say it is as homogeneous as Europe was before the Second War. So let's wait what will happen now, okay? So maybe after 5-6 years it will get better, but in reality we are not a homogeneous region. And as a Minister of Trade at that time, I was responsible for trade. People are referring to the reality that trade was only 10%. That is true. Why it is only 10%? Because politics was interfering. I can tell you not only politics, even personal things were interfering. I, as a Minister of Trade, I had to suffer between Egypt and another country because one of the leaders did not invite the other one to the wedding of his son. And we had to stop trading because of that. And I can tell you this is not stopping. This is still the trend happening in many places. So interference between personal, political, emotional. So the maturity of having a real trade agreement in place is still not there. And that is very much, struggling for everybody, despite the reality that if we have trade agreements and they're working, they're a huge catalyst for reform. Finally, how is it working between North and South? Well, of course, we have a lot of goodwill from the North. Of course, Egypt, the North African countries, the Gulf have always been benefiting from the goodwill of the North and the South. But I can tell you that that goodwill is not good enough. The implementation of that goodwill is not really happening at the level that we want. And I always say you have to be open in Europe. You have to be more open to accept the trades and ideas coming from the South. Because if you are not open to the trade and ideas coming from the South, you have to be ready to get the bodies. People will come. So you better open your markets for trade, open your markets for ideas, instead of just, having all the people coming here and then you are complaining. So that is not happening at the level that I think it is effective until this day.
Ulrik, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to support both the points you meant here, two of the points you meant here. One is that I talked about regulation and new regulation and sound regulation, but really it's also, as you said, about simplifying existing regulation to unlock investment. I think that's also an important point. And then the point you made about trade. The overall trade environment right now is characterized by a big crisis in the multilateral trading system. We haven't had a multilateral trade round finished since '94. That's 25 years on. In a few days, the WTO appellate body, that is, if you like, the highest legal body of the international trading system, is about to become paralyzed because there are no more judges left. At the same time, there is a need to upgrade rules on e-commerce, on carbon leakage.
I worked with the WTO for a long time. I can tell you there is only one thing happening to us in the South now, that the North start to look like us.
Exactly.
So that emotional attitude in trade, and one individual deciding what to do in the morning, it's becoming very similar now to the situation we have here.
But that then leads to the point that you cannot even rely on the multilateral trading system. You cannot fall back on that. So that maybe increases the need for regional trade agreements. That would make it even more necessary than if
which is the point President Prodi was making.
Yeah, but, exactly, that's your point.
You have in all the MENA only Egypt of very few countries who have an internal market. This is the reality, and you have not an institution to try to harmonize it. Let us take a place, Africa, is even worse, in terms of economic. But at least you have an effort because of African Union to have trade, to try, and then you need infrastructure, you need everything. But you have an idea of, let's say, changing institutions, So this is why, if you cannot have in MENA, because it's so west, at least to find some sub-regional case. Otherwise, you can have, I repeat, you can invest in a country only where you have an internal market.
Yeah, President Prodi, you mentioned the African Union, and the Continental Free Trade Agreement is on the horizon. We're sitting with a situation where 54 countries of 55 have signed the agreement. 28 have ratified. The only country that hasn't signed is Eritrea. In terms of ratification, Mauritius was the last company to ratify, and we're sitting with trade expected to commence under the new regime on the 1st of July 2020. Now, the reality is that the African Union is working towards growing and catalyzing trade in Africa so that you have the biggest free trade area, if we get it right, the biggest free trade area in the world by 2050. It's an audacious project.
By geography, yeah.
But we've got, on purchasing power parity perspective, $6.7 trillion in terms of aggregate GDP for the African continent. Let me bring it back to...
Well, but I think if you have some sort of institutional idea, then infrastructure will follow. Because they say, look...
Exactly, and the regional infrastructure trade is, the infrastructure for regional trade is being developed. As we speak, there are examples of corridors that are happening between Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon and different parts of the African continent. So let me bring it back here, Your Excellency, to how you see, I think, gentlemen, we're quite negative on our agenda right now, that this seems to be too big a strategic discussion in terms of saying innovation and investment when it comes to Middle East and North Africa. But let's pick up the pace now. We've got to box cleverly for solutions. And again, let's not forget the themes that you've all spoken about: youth, education, digitization. Women also need to come into the fold. So let's pick up the conversation there, Your Excellency, and perhaps you want to start with the potential for digitization.
Yes, absolutely. I think we have agreed that the whole region has a great potential, but I think it is conditioned on reducing the political tension. Even, I just want to comment back to the President about the integration of the groups of the region. On the 70s, 6 countries in the region, which is the GCC or the Gulf region, has come into union to integrate a lot of aspects, including the trade. Then, until 2 years ago, the blockade issue that came to the surface, it's a political disagreement, it destroyed all the trading relationship that we have between. So you have the best example on the MENA region that was evolved until a small disagreement politically has destroyed whatever has been done for the last 20 years. This is an example how the political issue or the relationship would destroy a lot of potential in this region. So going back to just to be positive in the region and how we can do, I think innovation is very important, and it is part of the education. It goes back to education. Education is a pillar for that growth. And we have a youth segment of our population. If we empower them, I think they could bring a lot of potential to the region. I think empower them with the social aspect, with the education, with the platform of economic reform that the government has to lead and has to just apply whatever has been done in the international. This will unlock a lot of potential on the international, on the MENA region. From our perspective as a QIA, we are taking technologies are very important, and we are investing internationally about it. As you know, technologies is impacting everything in even in the conventional businesses, even in real estate, even in equity market, and in financing as well. Fintech is getting, influencing every single sector in our investment. So we are taking this very seriously. From a local perspective, we are really working toward making sure that youth have an access of funding and have an access to investors who has a risk appetite, who has a long-term horizon in terms of investing on a new technology, on new technologies or concept. We are in discussion with the Development Bank, for example, to create a fund that the mandate of this fund is investing in the new technologies and make sure that whoever has the technologies in the market has an access to funding and the basic support to have an impact. As you know, technology is getting very important, even in the developed countries. It's taking, maybe 30% of the, for example, U.S. market is a technology companies. Every country in the global is taking technology seriously, They are investing on that aspect to make sure that, and you have a population who are tech savvy, and by default, I mean, yeah, they are using, iPhone, very, very normal. Even if they are not educated, they are very, very tech savvy. So unless government taking this seriously, they will not capture the growth that they
And perhaps also the other side of the coin, sorry to interject there and throw forward to Pierre, is that if government doesn't take digitization technology seriously, then that youth element and their ability to utilize technology becomes the Achilles heel of the MENA region. We go back to situations like the Arab Spring of 2011. Pierre?
No, the open access to technology is obviously not only an economic challenge or an economic opportunity, but also a social one, I would say, as you mentioned. And obviously, I'm going back maybe to the question of integration, because obviously there are political hurdles to that. They were mentioned, obviously the lack of trade agreements, the fact that two, at least, of the countries, Libya and Algeria, are not members of the WTO. But we believe also it's our mandate to think that change is coming from the bottom and not only through agreements at the top level. And I think, obviously...
You spoke about that mindset in terms of, is there the will to change, to adopt a new mindset as a collective?
But I think this mindset of government can be changed also by the pressure also of the civil societies in each and every of these countries. Because when you look at the aspirations, expectations of the youth of all these countries, Egypt is one example where obviously the demographic trends, if you look at them in every year, bring to 2 million new people in the job market, who have expectation in terms of living standards, of access to this world society of information. And I think when we are underlying always challenges, there are also a lot of success stories in the field of technology, of leapfrogging. There are a lot of examples of also governments understanding at some point that it's very important to have the right set of rules which will open new markets. And one of the examples we mentioned before, which is, for example, the market of renewables, which has been exploding in all the countries. For example, in Egypt, where invested more than 1 billion euros last year in the largest park of solar park in Africa, is a good example of when you have the right set of rules, you can attract international investors who didn't know, by the way, the Egyptian market or the African market for most of them, but also creating thousands of jobs.
The President Prodi made the point that the heavy reliance on oil and gas and the lack of diversification in the economies. Ulrik, I know you wanted to pick up on our train of thought, but I also want to talk about diversification and come back to President Prodi's point.
Yeah, but because you mentioned when you opened this round about digital transformation, education, youth and women, and I think maybe to bring all those together in one, I think there's a word of warning here also on digital transformation, because the digital transformation has in common with globalization two features. One is that we certainly believe at the OECD that they are beneficial to the whole of society. The cake gets bigger, but they have another feature in common, that they're not automatically evenly spread. So I think it's also important for governments, be it in the MENA region or elsewhere, to be mindful that some of the inequalities, or at least perceived qualities that accompany the globalization, that we don't fall into the same trap when it comes to digital transformation. Our analysis clearly shows that digital transformation does not come readily to all. It depends. It's easier to embrace digital transformation if you live in a city than if you live in rural areas. It's easier for men than women. It's easier for the highly educated than the less educated. But it's also easier for the young than the old. So maybe here there is an extra reason for optimism, that if you could fuel the young, the vast young generations of the MENA region with the right types of digital transformation, if you could help them overcome digital divides, digital gaps, maybe there's an extra incentive here to do a dual effort on both digital and education.
So it's actually a focus on education in the digital space.
Exactly.
as a starting point.
Yeah.
Your Excellency.
Yeah, I would like just you touch on technology, and I think we are all hungry for something as a good news to say, right? So let me just share with you the reality today, that things are progressing despite the effort of governments, okay, to stop them. Because in reality, the technology have been able now to break a lot of frontiers and a lot of resistance. And I will give you a real example, because you spoke technology and women, and now I'm using my experience as in fashion and from Valentino. 2 companies in the region. 2 companies are $1 billion, established by women in the last 5 years. Women, one in Dubai, maybe some of the women know it here, it's called Huda Beauty. You know it? Okay. This is a company starting through Instagram, and today it's $1 billion company. And it have already been valued as $1 billion. Pure innovation, pure personal initiative, and it's working. Another one in Turkey called Trendyol. Trendyol is a lady that, you know, she's 36 years old, started this company 6 years ago. She sold it last year for $1 billion to Alibaba, okay? And both of them have had a fantastic success despite everything in the region, because they went actually above the frontiers by connecting to the consumers, connecting to the people. Both of them got funding from money coming from Europe and the United States, because this is one of the things we are missing in the region. We don't still have people who have enough confidence to go and give 20 or 10 or 30 or $50 million for a young girl or a young boy because they have a good idea that they want to implement. It doesn't exist anywhere yet, okay? And I'm not assuming government will be able to do that, but we need to be able to create the environment for that. So the good news, yes, it is happening. We have so many smart people, and if you want me, I can tell you tens and tens of people that I know, especially in my field, that are making it happen. Most of them women, most of them young people, from Morocco to all the way to Doha, to Dubai, to Saudi Arabia. There are a lot of people trying very hard to break that mold now and get there. And I think technology is helping it. Well, I hope people start to get notice, because what they need desperately now is the complete ecosystem. They need the financing, they need the market's accessibility, and they need the supply chain. And the few of them who can be able to break that, they make a lot of success.
President Prodi, I want to come back to you, and we spoke about political will. And this is something you know about. You've got the experience in the political game. When you look at the leaders across the MENA region, do you see a mindset that is open to the change that Pierre was speaking about?
Well, there is a great variety of systems and governance. You cannot generalize. But, you know, now, the need for a technical change is 100% shared by everybody. If you talk with any leader of chief of government, he will say, look, we shall have connectivity everywhere, so on, so on, so on, so on. This is absolutely a precondition of any. But you don't find the specific choice in which to direct investments. You know, they say you have not, let's say, a differentiation among different countries. When you talk with leaders, they say they play the same music in any country. You know, digital environment and so on and so on and so on. But when you want to help the development of an entire area, you must choose the sector, the industry. You must make complementary choice. Otherwise, clearly, I repeat, let's say the general trends are always the same. Also because international consultants, they play the same music in any country. So.
So let's choose digital. Let's choose education as a starting point.
Indispensable, but given for granted, But what I should try to understand is, look, in this strange change of the world, global trade is terribly in difficulty. You need regional trade. We are withdrawing in our world idea. 5 years ago, this roundtable should have been totally different. We export to United States, to Europe, to so on. In this moment, it's absolutely contradictory to say that.
Well, what we do know is that we're living in an uncertain world across the spectrum.
So, for example, how, let's say, you can, MENA countries extract the Chinese disinvestments in order to export to Europe or to have internal trade. There is a strategy for that. Clearly, in the situation we described, if because of this regional change, the Chinese must invest abroad in some area, they will choose Ethiopia or a country in which you have the idea of a big market.
I think it's clear that capital flows where capital is welcome. I'm going to bring it now back to Your Excellency Al-Mahmoud. Let's talk about the tangibles. Rachid put on the table 2 examples of businesses that were started in the tech environment by women on Instagram: youth, digital investment and education, QIA, Qatar Investment Authority. What are you doing in terms of tangible examples that we can rally on?
First of all, this example has been successful because they are in the tech. They are beyond the barriers that a normal businesses would face in the normal sectors. So what's helped them is, in the technology business, they are beyond. They work in the internet. It's a little bit. They release themselves of a lot of restriction that any normal businesses. From our aspect, His Excellency Mr. Rachid, he's right. I think in the region, the ecosystem for these technologies and new businesses do not exist. From our perspective as is QIA, we admitting the issue in our local economy. We are trying our best to really fulfilling any gaps that our economy is facing, and one of them is really having the support of the new businesses, especially which are based in technologies and innovation. So we are creating the fund. We are trying to help them with the government support to have an easy access in terms of normal support or research or a funding, and it is going on, but it will take time, it will take an effort, and I think for the whole region they need to really focus on this segment more importantly.
So, Pierre, I want to now just look a little bit further and look at your mandate, or how you look at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. How you're looking at MENA, and you must be setting some targets, or, this negotiation, you're involved. What is it that you're wanting to achieve? How can you weigh in and change, whether it's policy, whether it's changing people's mindsets? What is the end goal for you as the EBRD?
Our angle is obviously building all this together, which means making the linkages between the investment capacity we have with transformational changes in the economies, which will open new opportunities for private sector opportunities. So I think, as it was mentioned, the question is not only about money flowing to the countries, because there is money coming from very different places in the world. President Prodi said about the changing geopolitical context. The Chinese 10 years ago were probably very absent country to now. In Morocco, in Egypt, in all these countries, we see mega investments, but which are not always coming with what is sustainable in terms of economic development of these countries, which imply technology transfers to build also the local capacity to create jobs with young people who will find more or less employment opportunities locally, instead of, by the way, looking at other horizons to Europe and other places where there is the perception that the skills will be better harnessed. So I think what we really look at is how, in concrete terms, we can have investment which have demonstration effects, investments which are linked to also targets which, for example, in terms of inclusion of women, of young people in remote areas. And what was mentioned before, which is, for example, the fact that naturally some commercial actors may have some risk aversion, for example, for women entrepreneurs creating their business in Jordan, coming from Syria. At least what is our experience is by taking some risk, additional risk, you have additional returns. And probably women entrepreneurs in the countries we are working in are generally very safe and very successful entrepreneurs, and by the way, can bring macroeconomic benefit in terms of long-term development by mobilizing a workforce which is unfortunately in many places untapped. So I think it's really this holistic approach which is very important, not being only thinking about short-term investment opportunities, but working with governments, with municipalities, with companies.
What about that gateway between MENA and Europe? I mean, are we going to see that solidifying?
I think, obviously, it requires first a set of relationship which should evolve in terms of trade, in terms of legal requirement to have access for goods to circulate in
policy
Europe.
Certainty in other words.
Obviously, policy certainty in the countries. But I think what we try to do is also bringing European investors in the countries, like I mentioned this example in energy efficiency and renewable energy
space.
Yeah. That is really transformational, and you have a lot of Italian, German, French companies which were out of this market and discovered the potential thanks to that. So I think that's full of hope.
Your Excellency?
I would like to add to his comments. The MENA region, the research shows that it needs to add 5 million jobs every year. This will not come from conventional businesses. It will come from technologies, renewable, a new segment of sectors that the MENA region needs. So I just want to add this statistic to his comment. So it is very important that the MENA region and government and businesses think beyond the conventional businesses, think in the climate change, renewables, adding, attracting European companies, for example, or international, who has the know-how to invest in the MENA region to create these jobs.
Deputy Secretary General, yes, President Prodi. Sorry, I'm coming back to you. You want to make a point, sir?
There is some sort of, let's say, common spirit here, but also a different accent. From Qatar, it's clear that you insist on innovation system, because you have a small country with a very high level of income, a very top education system. But when you tell that we have to create 5 million jobs, new jobs per year, we have to think to agriculture, we have to think to the simple trade, to all of that. And so clearly we have to push innovation, because otherwise the system does not keep. But we have also to try to open the market for the daily things that we need, you know. So I think that we have, let's say, to link Qatar with Algeria, with Egypt, with that, you know, because the needs are totally different from the perspective of development. 5 million new jobs per year are 5 million, you know, and in innovation you can employ.
Agriculture is central to any jobs discussion when it comes to any Africa territory. So, I mean, innovation and digitization can also be applied to agriculture, but this is a very challenging arena. I'm a farmer's daughter, and changing from subsistence farming, which we see across the African continent, which employs the majority of the population, to commercial farming is a tall ask. We have it, President Prodi, you're absolutely right. This is a discussion that we have, whether it's at the World Economic Forum in Davos, whether it's the World Economic Forum in Africa. So we need to address agriculture as one of the key players. And maybe from the OECD perspective, you can come in and tell us what the projections are when it comes to commercialization of agriculture.
I'm the son of a farmer, so that makes me a little bit more detached from the sector. So I'm not sure. I to be honest, I want to give advice.
So let's stay away from the stats. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that you would have the stat, but it's obviously something that is largely part of a discussion point when you look at job creation,
of course.
Even in the MENA region.
Of course it is, and when it comes to governance and competitiveness, I think what holds true for other sectors also holds true for agriculture. We've been trying to help the region for 15 years on all of this. I don't feel I have the expertise to say anything specifically about the agricultural sector, but we offer help to MENA countries in all sectors. We do country programs, but they're tailor-made to each country. It's not a question of us coming to tell them what is the right stuff, but we can offer what we've seen as best practices among the OECD membership or among other countries outside the OECD. We can see these are the best practices. This is how we can help you, and we have country programs also.
So you will definitely have departments that are focused in the value chain, the supply chain when it comes to agriculture. And Your Excellency Rachid, let me take you from fashion back to your time as Minister of Trade and Industry in Egypt. Talk to me about your views in terms of this theme of agriculture that President Prodi has put on the stage.
Well, the reality is there is not one solution for the problem. 5 million jobs to be created every year, well, that's a challenge, but at the same time, you have to improve your productivity, right? So when we touch on agriculture, as from your personal expertise, when you go into commercialization, you will lose jobs, correct? So commercialization and increase of productivity of agriculture will mean that you will lose jobs in agriculture. And people who are in the farming, they will be out of job. That is the reality.
So this comes to the whole technology, automation,
but
digitization.
That's fine, because there is, as I said, there is not one bullet that will solve the whole situation. You need to continue to improve productivity, even if you lose jobs in certain areas. Because at the end of the day, that increased productivity will allow you to increase investment and to increase jobs in a much more productive way. So you have to let the market dynamics take its place. And that is the challenge that we have in the region, because sometimes the politics do not understand that. So the politics and the way that things are governed, sometimes are holding back the improvement on the productivity side. So, as I said, there is no one bullet that can solve the problem. The reality of the matter today that we have on the political side, you know, like some people say, we are optimistic because it cannot get worse. Everything is so bad that, you know, we cannot assume things will get worse. And that's the optimistic view, right? But while things are terribly in the region, because we know how it looks, you know, whether it is in the the challenge in the Gulf, or the problem in Syria, or the problem in the stability of countries like in Sudan, the challenges in Algeria. We can go across the whole region, right? While we are facing that situation, we need to ensure that things are still happening. And the positive thing, people are not waiting. People are not going to wait until they die because things are not happening. So there is a pressure, and they're using all the tools that they could get. The way that we can help them, especially from the north, improve trade relationship, open up trade relationship, because it opens channels. As President Prodi said, some of these markets are very small. People cannot even produce for them. Agriculture can be fantastic if we start having infrastructure to export to Europe. That will create an amazing opportunity to grow, because once you do that, labor starts to come into the equation again.
It comes back to, President Prodi, I'll come to you in a minute, that stat. If we look at the MENA region, 484 million people basically populate the region, and it comes to size matters. If you integrate, you've got a viable trade bloc there. President Prodi, you wanted to make a statement?
Yeah, when I tried to prepare myself to this discussion, I was thinking, what can be specifically for this area? And I think we have to prepare a great project for the reconstruction of all the area destroyed by the wars. Because if we prepare this, we speed up the process. I asked today, to Iraqi ambassador. So you did the reconstruction. Did it start or not? And then the reaction of people in which I asked that, it was absolutely different, But the idea I received that all that is abandoned, so starting from let's say Qatar or Kuwait of the Gulf, to have the idea of let's say organizing the reconstruction of the infrastructure, of houses, of the cities, of the communities, refugees, resettlement, that is the real pain of all the country from Lebanon to. I think that this is a message that will speed up not only growth, but manpower, because to reconstruct your country, you need a lot of manpower of all the types, This, I was thinking, could be a proposal specific for MENA areas, starting from what you told about the tragic situation politically, and you have that, this is what I mean.
Vice President Heilbronn, you want to come in?
Maybe just to add on that, because I think it's a very important point, how we can support the acceleration of change, more or less not to waste time, because it's also a race where, in fact, there is a lot of tools, of technological tools, but also financial ones, which can help these countries to leapfrog. We talked a lot about integration within the MENA region and about challenges. What is striking to us is also the fact that integration probably from this region or these countries with sub-Saharan Africa is sometimes going faster than integration between these countries. When you look at Moroccan investment in Ivory Coast, in Senegal, is a driving force which is quite powerful. The second element is obviously linked to distributional effects of change. And you talked about agriculture. Technology can change a lot this sector, and we see that in all countries. It can increase productivity, as Mr. Rachid mentioned. But afterwards, there is one word applicable to climate change, which is just transition, which has to be translated in, obviously, concrete actions, because it means that people who will lose also jobs, because productivity will increase, because the sector will change, have to find also new opportunities.
Which is the point that His Excellency Rachid was making.
Yes, and that points also to education, skills mismatch, which is fundamentally a challenge. If you don't manage that, you are just destructing jobs without creating new opportunities. So I think also as a public institution, a developing institution, having concrete tools, working with donors. Obviously the European Union is a huge donor to us, but also we are working with other donors, and being able to both attract private investment, but also on concessional capacity, build vocational training, build the capacity to deal with the skills mismatch is very important to have economic inclusion.
We're going to go to closing comments. President Prodi, you want to make a statement there?
I ask you, why not trying to put together all these big financial bodies, international or national, to prepare some sort of scheme for reconstruction? You know, that you prepare the financial aspect, the technological aspect, you know, because you give a political message also, and you speed up. I am convinced that you speed up, you know. The idea that even if Syria is still in turmoil, Iraq, you know, there are European and non-European bodies who stick together and say, look, let us prepare a scheme for action for reconstruction. You know, this is
yes, we're going to pick up on that, and then I'm going to go to His Excellency Rachid on starting with closing comments. We'll move down the panel from that side.
But maybe one word,
yes,
because what President Prodi mentioned is, I think, something which is very dear to our heart, and I think it's the main challenge, because you have plenty of institutions which try to also have
maybe
new projects.
Too many institutions?
Yes,
too many.
Maybe too many. But I think
one plan for reconstruction,
yes,
one plan.
And I think they don't have the incentive to work together. I think what we've tried to do in Tunisia in the last 2 years, which is bringing...
We've just had a bilateral today to improve our cooperation, so we see eye to eye on it.
No, but,
well, I like this. This is like a boardroom discussion. Everything's coming together towards the end of our panel.
But Tunisia is a good example where there has been an exercise between all the international institutions trying to find a reform matrix and go together to see and to have the discussion with the Prime Minister, with the President, with the civil society, with businessmen, and agreeing on a platform which is common to us, and afterwards putting our own contribution to the different parts of this plan, if you want, bringing private sector in. And I think that's the main challenge. If we could develop that in the future years, obviously streamlining the development architecture, I think, is a very important element, but also cooperating better between institutions.
Well, I like the energy as we're building to concluding comments, Your Excellency Rachid. Well, going back to the overall theme, obviously, we were tasked with driving investment and innovation in the MENA region.
Listen, from what we said, of course, I have to start by saying, let's be optimistic. Let's assume things will not get worse politically. But I would like to highlight one point, that, you know, the potential of investment, the potential of innovation in the region is huge. And I believe that I have a tremendous confidence in the use of this region. I've seen young people across the region, and they are amazing. I've seen many of the young people actually in Europe, even in the company I operate here. There are so many extremely creative. I do not underestimate their capabilities. And I do not underestimate the capability of the young people of the region, that they can make the exploitation of potential that we have been failing to do. So I am definitely betting on the young people of the region to make the difference now.
President Prodi, concluding comments from you, sir.
Well, you know, my comment is, let us act together, you know, because I do think that the urgent need in this moment is we help the resurrection of the area, you know, and then all what we listened is very, very useful, but must be something targeted to the area.
Deputy Secretary General.
I started my intervention today jokingly complaining about the lack of hope on that screen up there. So if I can then perhaps on a much more serious note, praise the very first app list that was up there this morning, where there was a sort of a vote on what were the biggest political or the biggest challenges to the region. And in a region that's marked by conflict and tension and migration and terrorism and so on, I was really heartened by the fact that climate change was also up there. I think if we'd had this conference 5 years ago, we would not have had climate change up there in a region that has so many other immediate problems. So I think the fact that this is also now on the agenda in this region gives me a little bit of hope, both when it comes to the climate cause and when it comes to this particular cause that we've been discussing today. And I think there is a little bit of a link here also, because there's also, in terms of innovation, I think greening the economies can be also a potential for interesting innovation in the MENA region. And I think when it comes both to the MENA region's economic future and when it comes to the future of the planet concerning climate change, I think on both of those accounts, we can probably rely more on the youth than this generation.
Well, I think on that point, we can rely more on the youth in this generation. Greta Thunberg has done more for the awareness of climate change in her very short time where she has been active in play. And I think that shows the power of youth that you're talking to. And also there's a level of impatience. Certainly, youth is not going to wait for the regulatory environment to change, and it's that impatient factor to coming in. Let's go to your comments here, Vice President.
I will be very short. I think we've been through more or less 3 or 4 years which have been very divisive in Europe, looking at the Mediterranean and Africa through the migration debate. And the title of the forum is about creating a positive narrative, not only for the youth of the countries, but also bringing something positive in terms of relation and partnership between Europe and all the countries in the south, on the southern shore of the Mediterranean. It is about job creation, it's about opportunities, and I think what we see in the private sector, when more or less there is a willing partner in the public authority field, national authorities, should give us a lot of hope that we can live up to the expectations of the youth of these countries.
Before I ask you to give your concluding comments, Your Excellency, I just want to get our technical teams ready in terms of the survey, because we are going to be announcing the results of that survey directly after His Excellency's comments. So the stage is yours.
I agree with my colleagues on this. I think the government has a responsibility to invest in a human capital, do an economic reform, reduce the political agenda. And I think we will have a potential growth in this region.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our esteemed panelists this afternoon. Thank you very much. We're now going to, and there we have it, the reasons are for hope, and we're ending on this positive note: achievement of negotiated solution to the war in Yemen, renewed youth and civil society activism, we've spoken broadly about that, and the launch of a regional security dialogue in the Gulf. There we have it, that's your voice. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're back on the stage with a special dialogue with the Deputy Prime Minister of Qatar. Also, he is the Minister of Trade. We'll see you shortly. Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.